I'm gonna try to get like on camera. I don't want to turn my back to anybody. Thank you guys so much for coming. I know it's a weird time, but I'm really excited to share about this project. So this kind of came about because I was just really interested in music education as I was like changing my career path, and then also in middle schoolers and their experience and how we can make their experience better. I took a lot of classes in the middle grades add-on, and that's when I kind of started becoming interested in adolescent development and how you can use what we know about adolescent development to make the experience better for middle schoolers. Because I don't know if you remember being in middle school, but it's not a whole lot of fun a lot of the time. And I wanted to figure out how to make it better because it's kind of like a time with a lot of potential that we could be doing so much better for our middle schoolers. So this is the title of my project. A Bright Point in a Dull Day is actually words from a middle school student, from a seventh grade chorus student. And what I really like about that is we both said the same thing. I was performing a bracketing exercise, which I will get into later. And I wrote something like, it was a bright point in many dark times, about my own experience in chorus as a middle schooler. And so when I heard the student say almost exactly the same thing, I thought almost immediately that was the perfect kind of way to bring all of this together. And I just loved that somebody else got to have that experience. So that's where our title came from. And this is a qualitative study. We'll get into all that too. So this is just an overview of this presentation. I'm going to start with an introduction, which I've kind of already given about the situation of this project and my own role in it. And then talk about a little bit of relevant literature and then the methods that I use to conduct my study. We'll have presentation of findings, which is the most exciting part, and then a little bit of discussion after. And then after the presentation is finished, I would love to take any questions that you have for me. I love talking about this. I think this is really exciting. So ask me anything. Be thinking of your questions. So speaking of questions, this was my overarching research question for the whole thing. This took a long time to develop back in the spring and early fall. But we kind of narrowed it down to, in what ways does participating in a music ensemble impact middle schoolers' perception of their overall middle grades experience? So I wasn't exactly worried about academic achievement, and I wasn't exactly just worried about how they feel about being in music class as like, do they like it or not? I wanted to know about how it impacts their whole lives as middle schoolers, both in and out of school, in and out of ensemble class. So the first thing that I had to do in conducting this study was just think about the context of music education in middle school and where we are right now. So the historical context was where I first started. The middle school movement started in the 1960s, and this is when somebody named William Alexander, he was proposing the name change from junior high school to middle school, because he was kind of saying it's not really like a junior version of high school. It's its own thing. It's right in the middle of like primary elementary school and high school. It's not, the kids are not at a developmental level where it should be a junior version of high school. And that's where the middle school movement kind of came into being. And this was around the time that AMLE, the Association for Middle Level Education, it was called something different at the time, but that's when that kind of came to be. A lot of educators came together to form that. And also another group of educators coined this term transessence, which is like a more specific term for adolescence, because it's a very specific time of development that doesn't just, adolescence spans like a little bit later. So it's the transition from like childhood to adolescence, like that space right in the middle, which is where most middle schoolers are from about like 4th to 7th or 8th grade. And so it was at this time that they were trying to focus their research and focus their practice and professional development and just make things better for middle schoolers, because they were kind of starting to see the trends, which unfortunately have kind of continued. So that brings us to contemporary context. It is not very much fun to be a middle schooler right now. It wasn't very much fun to be a middle schooler when I was in middle school, or probably when you were. Um, Lots of educators are trying really hard to make changes, but they are dealing with declining mental health, with declining access to services. There are a lot of underserved populations in middle schools who are getting even less access to services. And it's just, they're not being served as well as they could be fully in middle school. And that's kind of where the interest for this project kind of came out. And also in my personal context, I remember the middle school environment being kind of similar to what you probably remember what kids are seeing now. But I also remember that the music room was a safe and inspiring space for me. I was in chorus. I loved music class. My teacher was really welcoming and inclusive. And I remember that being kind of a contrast to the rest of the school. And we'll get into that a little more later. I think that's kind of a prevailing theme with student musicians. So out of all of that, I made this project, and also out of all of this. So my theoretical framework was made up of three lenses: so middle school climate and experience, music education specifically at the middle level, and then joy in school. So middle school climate basically just refers to how the students feel while they're at school, how they feel about school, if they feel safe, if they feel happy, if they feel like they're being served and responded to well. And there are a lot of, I don't remember specifically what each of these say, but I do know that middle school climate is not really perceived positively by these students. And also it tends to decline as they get older. So like sixth grade students have a little better of a perception than like eighth grade students, but there's like a steady decline in their perception of like what the school climate is like as they progress. And also there was a really interesting study that was done with Turkish middle schoolers and American middle schoolers. And the Turkish middle schoolers all thought school was very happy and nurturing and like creative, and they were really happy to be there. And the American middle schoolers pretty much just said school was like chaotic, and it was loud, and it was crowded, and it was hard. And even some of them felt like it was dangerous or painful. So that was kind of a staggering contrast of like what middle school could look like somewhere else. On the lighter side, music education has always been proven to be a good thing at the middle school level. And I'm sure there's lots of people in here who know about that. But a lot of the studies have been focused on academic achievement. And personally, I don't really care about academic achievement. That's pretty bold, but just my thing. Most of you probably know that. I care about students having a good, positive experience. And if that means that they're not making straight A's, then I think that's okay. But band and chorus have both been shown to increase academic achievement at the middle school level, and also some other things like student satisfaction and academic skills. There hasn't been a lot of research on orchestra, so it was really cool to be able to bring that in with this project. But there was kind of a gap there where it was like mostly about academic achievement and not so much about how it helps them be like better people and have a better time. And that also kind of relates to the last lens, which is joy in school. This is not a new idea, but it's a new kind of like thing that we're talking about. So I have this book right here, Unearthing Joy by Goldie Muhammad. And her big thing is joy and figuring out how to incorporate that into the school day. It's something that like, again, isn't new, but can be absent. And I think it's something that all students deserve to have. And I found, well, I don't want to get ahead of myself. I found that music kind of relates to that in arts in general. But these are just a few articles about joy in school and ways that we can increase it, but also why it's important to students. Okay, so now we're going to get into the methods. So I can't see all of my things, but so I developed this as a constructivist grounded theory study. I chose that because I liked the way that this approach would help me to engage with the data and also to be part of the study as like an instrument, I guess, in the study. Like I had my own perspectives and there was no way for me to turn those off. So I just had to use those within the study, use those as like a tool rather than something to like try to push away. So constructivist grounded theory comes off of regular grounded theory, which was developed by Glaser and Strauss in the 1960s. Their student, Sharmaz, developed constructivist grounded theory, and the main difference is that constructivist grounded theory doesn't focus on discovering things from the data, but rather constructing theories, finding things from what you have found in the field. And there's some specific characteristics like memoing, so writing your thoughts, kind of like a journal, like brain dump almost after all the stages. So I did memoing before and after, and also during transcription and coding at like all these different moments to capture like what I was thinking about and find some patterns ultimately that ended up my theoretical concepts. Specific coding, theory, construction, which I've talked about, and then returning to your data. So I did a lot of like going away from it and then going back to it and reading it later and finding things that I hadn't seen before. And so I just got to engage with it really deeply. This also really goes nicely with the qualitative tradition, and I knew that I wanted to go qualitative because I just had a lot of thoughts about the context. I had my own reflexivity, like I was definitely involved in the context, and then rich description. I wanted to be able to tell these student stories very deeply, not just through numbers and things like that. So we started with the research question, which I detailed earlier. The initial design was to do interviews with individual students, but we kind of decided just to do focus groups because of time and participation constraints. But I am really glad that we did focus groups because it was really cool to host a conversation and have the kids interact with each other rather than just with us. So of course, we went through the IRB process first and lived to tell about it. Everybody is here. I just closed my study. That was like the best feeling ever. And then we went and visited the schools for recruitment, and this was really fun. I loved just going into their classes and seeing what they were up to. It was like Christmas time, so they were kind of wild, but it was really fun. I got to tell them about my study and what I was going to do, and then try to see if there's anybody interested. And then when everyone brought us back their consent materials after the holiday break, we kind of got our 15 participants like together. So we had 3 days of focus groups. They were after school, they were in a conference room, and my main goal was just to facilitate really natural, comfortable conversations. So we just all sat around a table and talked about music. And I had some specific questions, which I'll get into on the next slide, which I formulated beforehand and ordered in a way that would facilitate that conversation. And yeah, after collecting the data, we got into coding. So I went through every single line of all the transcripts and I wrote one thing that I thought of for that line for all 3 focus groups. And then I came back and did it page by page after doing line by line. So I would kind of synthesize everything on one page into like 1 or 2 statements. And then I went back to that and started to kind of put it back together and create those categories from that. And I had a really good time coding, if you can't tell. I loved it. It was so fun. I had highlighters for every theoretical concept and colors, and it was a lot of fun. And ultimately, that helped me get to my theoretical concepts. And I did miss one at first, so I had to do that Sharma's constructivist grounded theory thing, go back to the data, and then I found one more thing that I wanted to pull out of there and that I had missed before. I don't know why these are in that order, but yeah, and at every stage in that, I wrote more of the memos, which you can read in the paper. And yeah, I think I talked about all that. So these are my questions. I put them in this order. I didn't always ask them in this order because the conversation was very different. Like one day I had 1 student and that conversation looked very different than the last day, which I had 11, which was a lot. But it was really cool because like I had the experience of an interview and the experience of having the kids talk to each other and having them compare their own experiences. I think my favorite question was, why is music important to you? Because I got a lot of really cool answers. Okay, enough about that. That was the boring stuff. This is the exciting part, the presentation of findings. This is what I found out. These are all going to be presented in the students' actual words because I thought it was really important to give middle schoolers a voice. They don't really get to have a voice a whole lot of the time. People tell middle schoolers to be quiet, probably a lot more than they tell them to speak. So I just wanted them to be able to say what they wanted to say through this way. So I put them all in their words. So the first one is called, Hey, I Did That. And you might have, if you're a musician, felt that after doing something, you know, really maybe not even that difficult, but something that you can personally feel really proud of. And so all of these kids had that feeling. They all talked about, so I synthesized those keywords, pride and accomplishment, from all of those things, all those codes that came up about pride and accomplishment. So some of the kids were just really excited that they could be a role model for their younger siblings or for younger students or people who wanted to be in band or chorus or orchestra. Some of them were just really proud that they could play an instrument or they could play at that level or they could sing that kind of music, which I can definitely relate to that feeling. They just, it was like a really, they all had a sense of pride. Some of them had a sense of pride that they were in that ensemble or that they were going to be in like marching band in high school or that they were going to be in a cappella in high school. And so they really just, they were like, hey, I did that. They felt really good about the skills that they had. And it was almost like surprising to them what they were capable of. I would quit school if it didn't have music in it. I think this is the one that I relate to the most. That's a very strong statement, but this is one of my favorites. And a lot of the students described their ensemble class as an escape. So they were talking about how middle school is hard, the social hierarchy is really hard to navigate, and middle school math is really hard, apparently. That's what they all said. Just all of those things are just things that they have to deal with, but they all said when we're in chorus or band or orchestra, we don't have to deal with that. Like, it's just a place we can go to escape and have a safe space. I really felt something when I heard them say that it was a safe place where they were safe from things like bullying or social pressure. Um, it was just somewhere where they could go and focus on the music and focus on the positive community. And the next one, A Family from Far Away, is all about that positive community, about the relationships. Obviously, I love to talk about the choral connection, how people's hearts beat together when they sing together and maybe play together. I actually have never thought of that before, but they were just talking about how music was a really good place to meet friends and to create these relationships. And then you get to go do fun things, but then they were all talking about maybe like Dollywood trips or whatever at the end. Um, they get to go and form these relationships and then get to carry those on with them. I think one person said something about their forever friends, which was really special. And I have a few forever friends in here that I met through music. So they were just, I really liked the words that they used about family and how your friends become your family and your instrument is your family. And that was just really heartwarming to hear that. A Bright Point in a Dull Day, that ultimately is the title of the project and the thing that I related to as well before. But a lot of them just liked band or chorus or orchestra because it was fun. They enjoyed playing and singing. They enjoyed doing it with their friends, but they really just needed a break. Of course, like developmentally, adolescents need a lot of time to like do things and to have a human experience. So I think they all just enjoyed getting to do something that they viewed as fun. And I think that's really important, and we lose sight of that a lot of times in the midst of everything happening. Crossing the Break is very specific. Do we have any clarinetists here? Okay, well, I had to Google this one. You probably know about
Oh, they're doing great. My sixth graders are crossing the break like nobody's business.
Great. Well, some of the kids in my study were doing that as well, and they were just really proud. I guess I should explain. It's a kind of a fundamental skill, I guess, for beginning clarinetists, and like it really opens up a lot of possibilities for new music that you can play. And so one student was just talking about how hard that was, but then how it was so rewarding when it was over. And so that's just the what I chose to represent, like the building of skills. And I think that all of them had something about skill development. They said something about how they found joy in building their skills and getting better at something, and not only feeling proud of themselves, but just like accomplishing something for them. Even the singers, it you don't really think of singing as being something that you have to accomplish, but a lot of times accomplishing a hard piece or something is really kind of that good feeling. So they're and a lot of them also talked about developing skills they can take with them into the workforce, into high school and college, and that was they were really excited about that. And for middle schoolers, I didn't really expect that. Like they are thinking about the future. And then the last one, Your Song. I keep saying this one's my favorite, but I think this one just kind of sums up the experience for me. Um, it's about a connection to music, connection to the music, connection to the other musicians. This is something that I can't really describe. I think you would have to experience it to have the full kind of Your Song connection. But if you've ever played or sang with a group, you kind of understand what that feels like. And it's a very specific feeling, but having a connection to the music and feeling the music itself, even like without the other people around you or the skills that you've developed or the sense of pride, just like the love for music. I never expected to find that so deeply in a group of middle schoolers. And this came up in a conversation we were talking about how choral singers sometimes like it's maybe easier for us to be expressive because it's coming out of like our body, the sound is. And so the student described that as your song. And so I think every musician has your song. And it was just really cool to know that middle schoolers are already feeling that and they know what to call it. And finally, so this is a quote from one of the students. He said, "Our voices are not heard. So first and foremost, I just wanted to give these students an opportunity to have their voices be heard, to let them talk, let them say what they think, and have someone listen to them." So with that, these are some implications of the findings. So after hearing what they had to say, this is how I, as like a professional educator, kind of connected it to something concrete and real. So obviously we know that community, agency and self-efficacy, social and emotional learning, and joy are really important to the overall middle grades experience and to an improved middle grades experience. And so these students are doing all of these things by being involved in music ensembles. So they're building confidence and life skills. They're developing relationships and positive group membership. This is really important because group membership is really important for adolescents, but sometimes it's not the right group. And a music ensemble is most of the time or always going to be the right group. Social emotional learning, this is kind of a buzzword, but it's a buzzword for a reason. They have these opportunities for expression and regulation, which is really important, and creativity. And then of course, just to have something fun, a human experience, something they enjoy, a connection. So many kids, like, they just don't have that, and that's why they hate school, because there's nothing fun. So I think fun is really important. We should not underestimate the power of joy and having just something that you love in your school day. I think one of the kids actually said, like, you need to have music in your day, and I really liked that. This is kind of my conclusion. One of the chorus singers said, I bet if I signed a petition, we'd get 400 signatures probably to keep band and chorus and orchestra. So this really spoke to how the community where the school was located was really invested in music education. And I think that if anything comes out of this, if we learn anything from these students and what they had to say, it's that this is important. And this is how we know it's important, because a sixth grader is already saying things like this. She knows the value and she believes in it so much that she kind of just assumes everyone else is going to believe in it with her. So for all of the principals and parents and policymakers and everybody who has a say in, like, whether you should cut the arts program or whether your child should be in band, chorus, or orchestra, or whether you want to make the time to add that to your schedule or whatever, I think it's always going to be a good thing. There's so much to be gained from that. Okay, and that's my references. So now, I don't know how much time I took, but I would love to open the floor for questions or comments or.
It's like the revival of the Broadway show. It's like the revival of your defense.
I had to like unearth things that I forgot about in a very long time. Yes.
What do you picture like future implications of your research being? I know you talked a little bit about that at the end, but do you picture your research going further and expanding your pool of subjects, or do you picture it influencing policymakers? Ideally, what would you want the impact your research to have?
Well, I would definitely, in an ideal world, want to do more. Like, we were kind of limited by time constraints and what we were able to do, but I would love to do more research. This kind of gave me the research bug.
You better hit me up.
But I really want to expand, like you said, expand the pool. But I think even this right now, like, I would really love to get more out there, because I think even like it's a small group of students, but that the fact that any student feels that way, I think is important enough that we should be talking about it more and showing that to kind of the greater stakeholders, but definitely want to do more research. So if anybody in here is interested in doing more research. Yes.
Question. So you talked about the students in the music programs. They felt like they were doing something for themselves, something that would, and I think that's great. I mean, it's going to be probably like a lifelong pursuit hobby for these kids, just like it has been for you. So I'm wondering how, if you see some way or some connection to have these students think about maybe some of the other subjects as something they're also doing for themselves. You know, like I remember a middle school teacher, science teacher that I had, was very engaged with us. And I felt like the things we were learning were things that I was learning for me. But so many times these students they feel like they're trying to learn this for their parents or for the teachers or for somebody else, but not for themselves. So I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, I think that really increases the buy-in when you think you're doing it, like you're developing a skill for you. And I think any teacher can learn from this, can learn from kind of like the music buy-in, like how we get that in kind of helping your students to see that they're learning for them. And that's really hard in middle school, but I think that's something that's really important and can be done. You had a question?
So as somebody who does teach middle school, who loves teaching middle school, what do you think the most important takeaway for middle grades music educators?
I think the most important takeaway for that group is know your impact. Don't underestimate it. Know that the work you're doing is really important, even when things are going crazy, which I'm sure that they are. Every single day that you go in there and you're giving this experience to a student, whether it's one or your whole band or whatever, you are giving them all of this and like so much more of human experience, something they can take with them forever, even if they don't go on to become a musician. Like you can't take away this thing that you're doing. So I think just know your impact, know your worth, and like know that you are like doing such a great thing.
Emily, did any of the students talk about those educators in your interviews?
Yeah, I was reading the paper today, and one of my favorite quotes was one of them said, "Our band teacher teaches us with, I can't remember this, with happiness and love." And I was like, that is so, that's like my goal as a teacher, to teach with happiness and love. So yeah, they were really, they were all three ensemble directors were mentioned, and they were really thankful for those teachers. And I think it'd be really cool for those teachers to like, obviously I can't tell them what the kid said, but to know their impact. Because like I know as a teacher that would make me feel really good.
Also, as a music educator, but also a person who's also been in choirs and stuff. There's something special about the teachers in your life, but I think it's a special breed of people that are music educators. I mean, it's just a different world, and
Yeah,
there's a camaraderie and a bond that you have, the students have with those people
yeah.
that are different in so many ways.
And that's where like my passion comes from. And it's kind of been a weird time with me trying to get certified and trying to become able to be a music teacher, because through this I've realized how much I want to do it and how much passion I have to make that impact. And looking back at my own educators, I feel the same way. And yeah, it is a special bond. And even with like other college students I've talked to, we all have a special bond and they all have a special bond with their teachers, even if they're not even musicians anymore. Like it's unexplainable really, but it's part of that your song. I think it's the music does something that you really can't explain, which is just really special. Definitely honored to be in that.
Music is the way music is taught is like everything ought to be taught with immediate feedback, with encouragement, with the feedback is, no, you need to hold your lips this way to get this sound or whatever. I mean, it's not just you did it wrong. You get a grade on it. It really is that correction. Feedback. We should be teaching everything that way. One of the things I want to say is a lot more people need to hear this or read it. So I hope you're pulling an article together or something for publication. I'm thinking I might want to show the recording of yours to my aspiring principals. I mean, y'all won't have to share with me, but you know, the arts, if a kid is coming to school because they have music that day, they're also coming to school for the other things.
Yeah.
So, you know, we can't take any of the arts out of schools. And they add so much value to not only the schools, but to our lives. But
Yes.
anyway, I think a whole lot more people need to hear your research.
I'm thinking too, if the kids that feel marginalized and oppressed within that system, if that administrator could then plug them in, like,
Yes.
Yeah.
oh, here's a pathway where we might reach you. Have you thought
That's
about
actually, there is a lot of research about neurodivergence and how
Yeah.
a lot of the traits for traits of ADHD are seen as detriments in the core classroom and academic setting.
I always
They're
put those
ignored.
kids-
Like they don't matter in the music
Yeah.
classroom.
Exactly.
Yeah, I cringe a little bit as you're talking because I'm a former middle school principal. But it really is, if kids don't have a place or they have the wrong place.
Right.
Yes.
Then move into music. Band is where I usually put them because at middle school, then that could follow them all the way through high school and they could do, they had their people. Yes.
So maybe in addition to presenting for the music educators, target a principal conference.
Yeah, or an article they need to go and they
Share that
Yeah.
Yeah.
kind of like lessons to, again, administrators who may not know what y'all
Yeah.
already know.
We should do an article.
We need to write an article. Do you want to do that research project that I did for methods of research? Oh my gosh. Ooh, how would you? But I think my favorite thing about this is how you framed it as you made the focus the experience of the middle schoolers, not the experience of other people dealing with the middle schoolers, because that's the thing,
Yeah.
tying it back to the research into the neurodivergence and music ensembles. Every bit of research out there focuses on how do we deal with these kids? How does music make them easier for us to deal with? Instead of, is there a correlation between what they're doing and if they enjoy it, or what brings them that joy, which I really appreciate that you took that lens when, I mean, I don't know what other research you found in that vein, but when I was looking into the neurodivergence,
Yeah.
there's nothing that actually focuses on on the kids, other than how do we make them easier for us to deal with.
Yeah, it's really more like how does it make it easier for them to deal with us? Like that's kind of what this is.
And that's almost what
Well, and I'll just second everybody. Your presentation is fantastic. I think it ought to be a paper. I had a question about your participating schools for your research. If you had one school that just elevated all of the numbers and to your data and just said this school is doing something right, whatever that complex of activity would be, what would you say were the high water mark? What would the high water mark be in that particular participating school? What did you think they were doing right?
I think just encouraging everyone to be involved in, like, I feel like sometimes music can be exclusive, based on who can afford it and who is talented enough, which I do. I think it can be a little bit. So I think the best thing is that they're encouraging their kids to do it and they're starting them early and they're kind of making it like a big deal. They're just really showing in all the ways how much they value music. I asked one of the kids, I was like, "Are you famous in school because you're in band?" Yeah, like everybody knows about us. And like I think just like making it, something that you want to be in, not like an exclusive like a clique. I know it can kind of get to be like that in some places, but something that is like intriguing and exciting and that we're really proud of them for doing. Yes.
So for those schools that you interviewed, were choir and band and orchestra, were they extracurriculars like after school or were they during the schedule? Because I feel like that can exclude a lot of students too.
Yeah,
If you have to ride the bus, you can't go to choir or whatever after school.
that's a really good question. Yes, they were curricular. So that was actually one of my criteria is that you have to be enrolled in the curricular chorus band or orchestra. There were a couple of extracurricular. I believe there was like percussion, there was jazz band, and there's like I think some kind of like choral. I really can't remember, but yeah, they were curricular, so they were having them during the day. And that was another one of my limitations of my study was unfortunately we had to host after school to protect privacy, and so we did kind of exclude some students who relied on transportation. And I don't like to be kind of like inequitable like that, so that was hard. But yeah, they're during the day. Sometimes that can be kind of a pain with scheduling, and you can't do both, which I think it's really cool if you can even do both. I didn't, and I wish I had, but I think a lot of schools don't have that, and I think it's really important that they do because that's how you get the most kids in there. So I'd say that's another thing that makes it a really high performing school in that way is like having it at a time where it doesn't exclude anybody.
One of the things schools do wrong too is that if kids are behind academically in a class,
Yes.
then they get pulled
Yeah.
from this or tutoring and stuff like that, and that is criminal.
That's what we do at our school. We have 2 classes per grade and they pull them out of the brass and percussion or they pull them out of the woodwind class. And so we have to flip flop their schedule and put them in the wrong class.
Yeah. It's not the way. Unfortunately, like there are some issues that are really hard to get around because of just things that are in place. But that is one thing I think you should never take from music or physical education or anything social, emotional, recess, any of that. So that's kind of or social studies or science. I love science. Honestly, I feel like if you're struggling in a class, you should take in that class. Like, but then you get more behind. I don't know. We can't fix all the problems here. Yes.
So you mentioned earlier on the thing about Turkey versus US, where like the Turkish middle schoolers were like, "I love middle school," the US middle schoolers were like, "I hate middle school." Were there any students in your pool of what's it called, like subjects or whatever? Were there any students who hated being in music school, like, or did you talk to any kids who didn't like being in these bands? And if so, what were their reasons?
Not really. That was another limitation, was that we had students self-select. So it was basically the ones who were probably gonna be like, I have something to say about this. But some of them did mention like things that they didn't like about their ensemble classes, like maybe they didn't like certain things the teachers would do, which were like, it wasn't anything, it was like the teachers would play with them or wouldn't play with them and they didn't like that or whatever.
Okay.
Which is like, but I most of them really, I didn't hear anybody say, I don't like band, I don't want to be in chorus. It was all like they really liked it and they all wanted to be there. And I don't know. So it could have been different, I think, if we had just picked a bunch of them and like, why do you like orchestra? But yeah, yes.
Were there anything you noticed, any trends that were between common groups? So things that only were said in band that were not said in orchestra or chorus, or things that were only said in the instrumental and not chorus, or things that were only said in the vocal and not the instrumental.
That's interesting. I spent a lot of time thinking about this. I think there were definitely distinct differences between all three ensembles. Like I don't want to say the students were different, but their experiences were different. The chorus people were a lot more like their main thing was like social things. So they were like, we're here with all our friends. We love being in chorus with our friends. Like that was their big thing. And then the band people were more just like, this is a lot of fun. Really, we like to do like rehearsal antics and things like that. And then the orchestra people were kind of all like, we like this because we get to be creative and we get to like better ourselves. So the instrumentalists, especially the band and orchestra, were all a little bit more about like self-improvement and things like that. And the chorus people were more about social and enjoyment.
Which I feel like makes sense as somebody who's in this.
Yeah.
Tracks.
Yeah. Yeah.
How like in rehearsal, like the chorus will not stop talking and like we're in the jitters, like
Oh, you should see my band classes. Sixth grade. Oh my goodness.
and like the orchestra is like silent and they're like, we're ready to go. And
Oh, they are.
talking. Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was, I think within like, they all kind of said similar things, which was really interesting to me that we have such a similar experience, even though our experiences are so different. But yeah, there were definitely some trends. Did you have another question?
Really.
Yeah, I've almost forgot. No, I was gonna ask what, and I know the answer, but I thought other people may want to know what music educator has been the most important in your life.
That's hard because I feel like they've all been impactful for some reason. Of course, I would say Miss Smith, my elementary school music teacher, was kind of like the first, and she kind of introduced me to music and like kind of told me that I should be into it. And I think like it's really important to have that. But everybody, my middle school music teacher is mentioned in the paper, and he was really like integral to my experience and even my like social experience. My college professors have kind of led me on in a really good direction. And of course, James, who is in here right now. I better think of something. But seriously, like your patience with me. But also just like being able to give me like that skill that I like really need for my career, like that is so valuable to me. You have no idea. And being able to do it in such a way that is like just so like comfortable for me coming in and being like scared and not really a natural. But I think every one of my music educators has had some kind of impact on my life as a musician and as an educator and as a person. I'm really thankful for that experience. And I honestly wish I could have had more like these kids had, because we didn't have a lot of this. Yes.
No, I know the answer to part of this, but
These are the scary questions.
do you think that just by virtue of being a musician, having musical experience, you were able to more easily connect with these kids? And the second part of the question is, how can we relate that beyond just like education? How can we bring that into other classes, not just in music education, but in other areas of education, as well as the real world?
Okay, so I felt like, yes, I was able to relate to these kids a lot because I was a musician. And even if I wasn't like most of these kids were in band, which I have no idea about, but I was able to kind of understand what they were talking about. I found I did really, really, really deeply to the chorus students, just because we'd had similar experiences. But I think Can you repeat the second part of the question?
How do you take those connections and the ease of connection with students and translate that into other areas within education and, you know, other areas completely outside of education?
I think it's really important. And as an educator, like this has always been my thing is like forming relationships. That's like the thing that's important to me. I think finding something that you can relate on. So I could relate to these kids because we all care about music. But when I was teaching science, I could relate to the kids because I thought science was really cool and they thought some of those things were really cool. So I think it's just finding, or even like when I taught math and like none of us liked it, it was like we all could find something to relate to like between each other. And I'm not saying that you have to like, it was easy for me because I was kind of like quirky and weird just like they were. But I think like forming the relationships and finding some common ground with your students and letting them know that you're a person in any subject, in any area, in any grade level really is really important to like forming connections. Obviously the music helps though. That's a big thing. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah.
I think the students very much could see in your research with them that you are a fellow traveler, right?
Yeah.
That you, I mean, you have a musical household. I mean, by the way, she does gigs and dad does gigs. I think maybe
Yeah.
lots of people have gigs, like you go see it. But like you just can't, kids know, right?
Yeah.
Know when we're serious, when we're aligned with their values and beliefs, whether we're like, and you can't fake that, right? Like,
Yes.
had I been the one asking the questions, it would maybe land differently.
I think that's another thing I'll say, being real with them. We talk about this all the time.
We talked about this.
We've talked about this too. Like, no, thank you, friend. Like, they know that that's not real. And so I think like being, being
a lot of practice
so,
with the cats in the house.
yeah, being like so genuine with them and like treating them like humans, I think is another thing. They are humans. They're not students. And in the paper, I tried to write like musicians or like students as much as I could because like they're students, but they're not just like kids. They are humans. And I think sometimes like we can even use like different terms that we don't mean, but I think just being very genuine in the ways that you feel about them and letting them know that you are for real and that you're not trying to be fake because they will pick up on it and they don't like that.
Especially in middle school.
For sure. If you want to stick around, sorry.
Sorry.
I feel really bad because I've sat over here and haven't asked a single question, but I feel like I've
You
learned
know
everything.
about, oh yeah.
But this is the first time I've got to see it in full, and I just want to say that was a really beautiful presentation, and it really moved me, and I kind of like almost cried. But
Yeah.
I've seen how hard you've worked, and so it's really cool to see it all come to fruition, and you're really making an impact with this, and I think it's going to change a lot of people's lives.
I already sent this to another band director.
You did?
Because that's why I texted you
Oh
a
yeah.
couple weeks ago, because there was somebody in one of the Facebook groups who was looking for like, hey, can I send something that will say to like my principal that will say that music is really important to kids?
No way.
And so I've been waiting for this.
That's like exactly what I was hoping for. Like, of course I was like, I want to do a thesis. That's gonna be really cool. I'm gonna feel really smart. And like wear a blazer and stuff. But
And you look great.
thank you. Oh my gosh. But now I'm like, I don't care about any of like this is really fun. I love this. But I think now if this can keep an arts program, if this can lead to more research that can keep an arts program, keep one kid engaged in this, like that's my goal. And to have one kid's voice be heard.
It's just published, yes. The thesis is published on Digital Commons. If you go to the Shared Library website and just search her name, it's there. You can read it and share it widely. I think your plan is to publish it, in probably multiple venues now. I think you have some options too.
Yes, and if anyone has anybody who like you reach out to me, if there's anybody who's like someone who might be interested, I am very interested
Yeah,
in
and share
sharing
this recording.
and
We'll
presenting
make sure you get
and
it.
recording and sharing the paper and sharing your presentation, whatever you want. I love talking about this. And I feel like speaking of one more kid's voice be heard, I forgot to tell the story of the Rolos.
Oh, there's
Rolos.
just significant.
There was this kid in my focus group and we had like rock candy, like chill conversation, comfortable, and we had a bag of Rolos. I think they're like Christmas. I don't really know.
Other sorted.
Yeah, there were multiple, but he like picked out all of the Rolos for something, and he was like making a little Christmas tree on the table while he was saying like the most gut-wrenching, like heart like things that you see in this presentation. Like he was saying the
How he
most
made his
insightful
mom.
things I've ever heard from a middle schooler. And that was my first time ever talking to like a middle schooler about this stuff. So I was like, wow. But while he was doing it, he was like making his little So at every event, we have to.
And then he said, can I take these with me? He just like shoved them all. So, okay, of course, we're protecting anonymity, so we just call him Rolo Kid. Every time in the day, I was like, oh, that's Rolo Kid. So
Yeah.
make sure to have a Rolo with his other.
And I think that also like taught me that like you can be silly and be smart. And that's something that I've had to like focus on in my own like development. Like I think it's really important to embrace your humanity. And that's like the whole thing of this. So
I think that's the power of music too. That's something that when you're talking about standardized, tested subjects, they don't have the flexibility to be human for half of a second.
You know,
I'm gonna cry
I
up here.
never had a music teacher that wasn't silly and smart and serious.
You have to be.
Silly.
You have to be.
Yeah.
For such a human subject,
Yeah.
such a human experience, you need to.
Man, I go to band concerts here for the band, the corny jokes.
yeah. Yeah, I think, and it's like, I don't know, it gives the students permission to also be their authentic selves. I've been thinking a lot about that, and I feel like we've talked about that a lot, just like being yourself and like letting them be themselves. And they see that you're like maybe a little silly, like it's okay for them to be not too silly, but like to be real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful job, Kaylee.
Thank you.